Hi, Matt. Welcome back. All right, last week we did a long lesson, and one of the things that we did was we went into secondary dominance. And to do that, we had to tell you what a dominant chord is. You now know how to find a dominant chord. It's the 5 chord in any key that you're using. It's the 5 major chord if you're in the natural minor scale. It's the 5 major chord if you are in the major scale. You already know how to find the 5 chord by counting out the notes. And I wanted to start making that process easier. If you might have viewed that video and said, I can't really find the 5 chord quickly enough, and we're going to do that this week. But we're going to start with a demonstration of what happens when you pluck a guitar string. Today we're going to try to explain why power chords rock using a slinky. All right, here's how we're going to do it. First, my assistant Nathan will take one end of the slinky, here you go, and go to that end of the carpet. All right, the first thing we're going to demonstrate is what happens when you pick a guitar string. Now, pick. You see how that wave travels up and down? That's the chaos that's unleashed when you pick a guitar string. Now, after the guitar pick attack goes all the way up and down, sometimes you're unleashing chaos, all right? But the resonant frequency is going to be about like this. Nathan, keep your end straight. There you go. See that? That's a long, slow wave. And that's the note that you're going to hear most of all. But the guitar neck is very long, and that string is very long. And sometimes you'll have waves traveling up and down that are going faster, like this. See how this is faster than the single wave? And also look at how about halfway in the wave, there's a place where the wave is not moving. So if you were to take your guitar neck and find that place halfway down your neck, you could make that string stay still at that place and let the waves continue to go up and down. All right, now if you go even faster, you see how there's a way to make it 3 waves. And there are 2 places where the neck can stay still. And if you could find that place in the neck, you will find a place where the wavelength is 1/3 of the dominant frequency, and the frequency is 3 times the dominant frequency. All right? Now what are those frequencies? What are those notes? Okay, so what did we learn? Well, we learned that when you strike a guitar string, it sends a shock down the length of the string. When the shock goes down the length of the string, it generates chaos. And part of that chaos is going to be, there's a wave, and that wave, for this 6th string, the E string, that's going to be the note of E. The note of E is going to be when the string goes up and the string goes back down, and the string goes up and the string goes back down. And it's going to go do that quite quickly, but it's going to do that at a frequency that we call a low E. Okay? We also found out that when it's going up and down like that, that's the main frequency, but it's not the only frequency. And you can do things to isolate the other frequencies that are going on in this guitar string. One of the things that you could do is you could find the place on the guitar string that's exactly halfway between the bridge and the nut. If you were to find a place that's halfway between the bridge and the nut, then what will happen is you will get a wave that goes down on one side, up on the other. And if you could just keep that string still in that one little point, the one little focus point, it'll go at a different rate. You already know what that is. That's the first harmonic. The first harmonic occurs where? At the 12th fret.
Okay? So if an E is right here, then you could put your finger down on the 12th fret, and if you just rest it there and keep that string from moving right at that point, but let it move everywhere else, then the dominant frequency will be another E, but an octave higher. The math behind this is this. The wavelength, that is the size of the wave, the length of the wave, is going to be half of what it is for the low E. Low E is a long wavelength. High E is half that length. The frequency of these waves is it's going to be twice the frequency of the low E. Low E has a frequency of E. This has a frequency that's twice as high. It just happens to be exactly an octave above. Now, if you think about it, you could also strike the string, release that chaos, and then put the brakes on right in the halfway point. So that frequency was already there. It wasn't the main frequency. The main frequency that you hear on an open string is the low E. Then you can isolate everything else out. You can isolate that out, the low E out, and you will hear the higher E. Okay? That probably explains why your ear finds the unison note, the octave, pleasing, because it's basically the same note. You can hear the upper octaves a little bit inside of every note that we play. You can on a stringed instrument. All right. But it also we can demonstrate that the upper harmonics also work out that way. The first harmonic is going to be the octave. What's the second harmonic? The second harmonic is going to be, if you can rest that string, 1/3 of this length. Okay? Where is that going to be? You know it's going to be at the 7th fret. That just happens to be 1/3 of the length of the guitar string is 7 frets. Why? If there's 12 strings in an octave, and the first fret, the first harmonic is at 12, you would think maybe it would be at the 8th fret, right? 1/3 of 2 octaves is going to be 8, not 7. But don't forget, you'll notice that not all frets are evenly spaced. They get smaller and smaller as you go up, and it just so happens that at exactly the 7th fret, there's another harmonic. That harmonic is going to be what happens when you have 1/3 of the string goes up, 1/3 of the string goes down, and 1/3 of the string goes back up again, and then they flip. So the sides go this way, and the middle goes the opposite way. Okay? And it just happens to be completely still at 1/3 and at 2/3. Those are the two focal points. Okay? And you can hear it there. Okay, so that's an E, and you can hear that I'm just isolating out the E and leaving the second harmonic there, the 1/3. The wavelength is 1/3. The frequency is 3 times the original frequency. So what's the note? Well, using a chromatic tuner, don't know if you can see it, but you can find out what that note is. It's not an E. This is an E. This is an E. That's not an E. That's a B. According to this chromatic tuner, that's a B. You can also match it against the B string. That's the same note. All right? What I'm trying to say is, when you strike an E string, you will hear a high E and also a very subtle, even higher B. It's not, you might think that this would be 1 octave up and this would be 2 octaves up, but that's not true. If you're gonna half the wavelength twice, then if you're gonna half the wavelength for every octave, then to go 2 octaves, you've got to half the wavelength twice. So that's why the third harmonic. The third harmonic is 2 octaves up. That is at exactly the 5th fret. Okay? Does that make sense? So this is twice the frequency. This is 3 times the frequency. And this is 4 times the frequency. This is 1/4 of the distance of the string. This will be 1, 2, 3, 4. And all those 4 parts are doing their thing with 3 points that stop. 3 focal points. So you could also get the same harmonic by freezing at both of these points. Because when you freeze at this point, it's also going to freeze at this point. Okay? All right. So where are we at? Why was that? What is the relationship between the E and the B? E and the B. It just so happens that the B note is the perfect 5th of the E. The dominant chord of the E major scale is going to be B7. Okay? There's something about that interval that's really, really important. All right? Now, let's say that I were going to play a chord that is super powerful. I'm going to let's start with a C note. That's a C, okay? If I want to be super powerful, the first most powerful thing I could do would be the octave. Now the octave is going to be 12 frets up, but I'm going to play 2 strings. So I'm going to play 2 strings up and 2 frets over. That's going to be 12. That's jump of 5, jump of 5, jump of 2 over. That's an octave. That's the most powerful note. There's a Pink Floyd song, Goodbye Cruel World, that all it does is bounce between octaves. Goodbye, cruel world, I'm leaving today. You know what? And it just does octaves. And if I want to be even more powerful, though, you could include the 5th. The 5th is going to be in the key of C, is going to be a G. Does that sound familiar? If you do all 3 of these notes at once, that's a power chord. Okay? That's going to be a strong, strong sound. You're going to, right? Why does rock and roll use power chords? It's because that C note is begging for a G. Okay? That's what happens when you play them together. Harmonically, those 2 notes reinforce each other and they create a wave of power. What it doesn't have is it doesn't have subtlety. If you want subtlety, you go into more notes. But these are the base that you do when you want to say power without spice. Okay? Also works melodically. Say you wanted to write a symphony about, I don't know, giant blocks that have supernatural power, monoliths that when the sun hits them, they become super intelligent. Okay? What would you do? You'd probably use a 5th to denote all of that power. Right? That's also sprach Zarathustra. If you wanted to write a theme song for the Man of Steel, right? That power is coming through. And doing that perfect 5th gives you a lot of power. John Williams was big about using 5ths. Let's see if we can... most of his works, a lot of his big movie themes start with a perfect 5th. There's also E.T. All right, they start with a perfect 5th. He always starts there. The perfect 5th, there's something about establishing all that power right away. He likes it. I like it too. Okay, so the perfect 5th is a little bit magical, mystical. There's a lot of power in the 5th. When we're doing secondary dominants, we go to the 5 chord, okay? Musicians like it to be easy to go to find the fifth. That we're now going to talk about the circle of fifths. Here's the musical Ouroboros that I keep talking about. I want to say that the way that I present it to you is kind of an invention of my own, where I wanted to show it in a ring. I wanted to show you all the notes in a ring to show that they go higher in pitch, but then they circle around and come back again, and it keeps going in a repeating pattern. Most musicians don't express pitches that way. They rather express it in vertically, maybe with the high pitches up top and the low pitches on the bottom, and they could repeat the pattern. But I wanted to show a repeating pattern like this so that I could show other things like the diagram of the diminished chord in something that I thought made more sense. But you will see musicians put this together and put the same 12 notes together in a different order. The order that I chose was to use ascending pitch. So if I started with a C, I would do a C sharp, D flat here, D sharp, E flat here, E, etc. But what they often do is something different. Instead of putting C next to C sharp, that makes sense because the two pitches are so close. But you really don't often hear a C and a C sharp together, a C and a D flat together. These two pitches together, it happens, but it's not all that common. What's really common, though, is the fifth. That C and that G. Oh my goodness, those two are in the C major chords, the C minor chords. There are chords that have a C and not a G, of course. But if you're going to do just a major chord or a minor chord, you always have that G. Sonically, C and G are very closely related. There's a lot of power between them. In fact, let's put the C up here and the G down here. Well, I'm not going to put the G down there, but C up here, G down here, and those two a lot of times get along really well. The G is the second harmonic of a C string, right? That C and that G agree with each other in a melody. That agree with each other in a harmony. So instead of ordering these by pitch, why don't we order them by how much the notes have in common with each other? The C would be here, and its biggest friend would be a G. The C and the G have a lot in common. This going from C up a fifth would be going to a G. How about what happens when you go up a fifth from here? Up a fifth from here, you'd get a D. What happens if you go up a fifth from D? You get an A. What happens if you go up a fifth from A? You get an E. All right, and so on. What happens if you go down a fifth from C? If you go down a fifth, you get F. Why are these two related? Well, if you think about an F power chord, it includes F and C. So C and F do have a lot in common, but C's dominant is going to be G. So in a C power chord, you're going to use G, but then you go, and an F power chord has a lot in common with a C power chord. It's got the C note, it's just using the F and its dominant. All right, let's keep going. B. This will be F sharp or G flat. This will be C sharp or D flat. Let's see, this one will be A flat slash G sharp. This one will be E flat slash D sharp. And this one will be B flat or A sharp. Okay, this is the circle of fifths. All right. Now, when we did our secondary dominants, I had a list of chords, and I said we're going from C to F, but we're going to do the dominant of F between, and that was a C7. How would we quickly find that chord? Well, we're going to F, and we can say on the circle of fifths, go up, and you will find the 5 of F. So that would, then you add the 7th, and you say C7. Going from F to A minor, we stuck in the dominant of A minor. So we went from A, and we said the 5th is going to be E7. Going to the G's dominant is going to be D7. And then from G back to C, we put in a G7. Okay? So if you have this circle of fifths printed out, and you've got a chord progression, and you want to find the dominant, you can easily do it. You just find what your target is going to be, go up one, and that'll be the dominant. You'll notice that the natural notes are all consecutive on the circle of fifths. The C scale starts here, but its range goes from F, C, G, D, A, E, B, down to here. Okay? It turns out every diatonic scale is consecutive on the circle of fifths. So you think about a diatonic scale, you can always put your hand over 5 of the notes, and the other 7 that are consecutive are going to be in that scale. Okay, so how common is the circle of fifths? You might notice this pattern in the chord wheel that I gave you. I think that I gave it to you after our last Amarillo trip, I think. But you'll notice that it has all the chords in this pattern. It even has C at the top. You assign the wheel, and if it's lined up with C, then it gives you the all 7 chords in the diatonic scale for C, and then you spin it either to F or G, and it gives you those keys. Why did they put it in this format? They didn't have to. They could have arranged them by pitch and put C next to C sharp. The wheel would have worked. It's just you would have had to find a different place for the 2 chord and for the 3 chord. And it's because the circle of fifths is useful in a lot of different contexts. Another thing, the music theory book that I got you, circle of fifths, is here on page 19. Okay? The circle of fifths is a tool, and it's going to come in handy quite a bit. All right. I keep saying the term perfect fifth. I say the interval of a fifth or a perfect fifth. I want to talk about the other intervals because I want to get the terminology out of the way for all the notes. All right? For this notation, I am going to actually list the pitches out vertically. And I'm going to say, first, if you have 2 notes that are 0 frets or semitones, this is the number of semitones between 2 notes. Let's do first one we've been talking about the most, 7 frets. You go 7 frets up, and we've been calling that a fifth or a perfect fifth. Okay? Even though it's 7 semitones, we call that a fifth. We'll go over the pitches in the major scale first. If there's a distance of 0 frets between 2 notes, 0 semitones, it's the same note. We're just going to call that unison. All right? Now what happens if we go up 2 frets? In the major scale, that's the second. So this would be note number 1. This is the second, and this is called the major second. Okay? Go up another 2, and that is the major third. Okay? The next note in the major scale is a half step. So we went here, we go whole, whole, half. What is this one called? If you say the 4th, you're right, but it's not the major 4th. This is the perfect 4th. in the same way that this is the perfect fifth, this is the perfect fourth. Think about it this way. Both the fourth and the fifth exist in both the major and the minor scales, the major and the natural minor. So a fifth is perfect and a fourth is perfect, but the third will change between the major and minor. Okay? Next major note is going to be 9 frets up. There's going to be the major sixth. Okay? And then another whole step to the 11th fret will be the major seventh. And then 12th is going to be 1 octave. These are intervals where the word interval means the distance between 2 notes. Okay? All right. So, as you know, in the major scale, we use the major seventh. In the minor scale, we use the flat seventh, is what we called it. But this, as an interval, the distance between those 2 notes, we call this the minor seventh. Okay? Same with here. In the major scale, we use the major sixth. But in the minor scale, the natural minor scale uses the minor sixth. Let's skip over this one for now. The minor scale doesn't use the major third, it uses the minor third. Second is a little odd because the major and the minor scales both use the major second. What do we call this one? We call this one the minor second. Now, why is it that the minor scale does not use the minor second, it uses the major second? Let's tap the sign. Okay? It's called the minor second because the second can be one of these two, but the natural minor just happens to use the major second. Okay? It's not called minor second because it's part of the minor scale, even though that was true for the third and the sixth and the seventh. It's called the minor second because it's the second, but it's more flat than the major. Okay? Now let's get to this 6th fret. That distance of 6 frets goes by a couple of different names. One name is, you could take the 4th and make it sharp. You could call it the sharp 4th. Often it's called the augmented 4th. If it's a 4th, but you just want an extra half step in there, we call it the augmented 4th. If you're using it, though, as the 5th, and you just want to flatten it half a step, that's called a diminished 5th. That's like taking the 5th and flattening it once. That's called the diminished 5th. You'll notice that the diminished chord uses a diminished 5th. It uses it as a 5th in a chord, but it's flat half a step. And for that reason, we call it a diminished 5th. But the generic term for any time you have 2 notes that are just separated by 6 frets, we call that the tritone. Why is it called a tritone? Well, I think it's because a tone, a whole tone, is 2 frets. A semitone is 1 fret. So 3 whole tones put together is a tritone. Now, 2 notes that are a tritone apart have dissonance. They fight. In fact, if you take 2 notes, if you could match your note with any other note that fights it as much as you could possibly fight it, it's the tritone. There's no bigger dissonance between notes than between your note and the tritone up or the tritone down. Both of those have a lot of dissonance. And if you think about it, the distance between this is 6 frets, but also the distance to the octave is 6 frets. So you could do like a power chord based not on power, but on dissonance. And that would be using the note, the octave, and the tritone. That puts 2 tritones in your little power chord, okay? Now, intervals don't stop at the octave. You can keep going. What do you call the octave? What do you call the note that's 13 semitones up from your note? If you're going up 13 semitones, that is a minor ninth. What about 14? Major ninth. All of these intervals get repeated. So then, instead of saying minor third, major third, we say on 15 notes up, we say minor tenth, 16 semitones up, major tenth. Then we're up to the perfect fourth. So that is a perfect 11th. All right. Augmented 11th, diminished 12th, followed by a perfect 12th, followed by the 13th, the minor and the major 13th, and so on and so on. Now, these are all in your music theory book that I got you on page 25. You'll be able to see the actual book's version of what I've been telling you. Okay? Okay, now, why are intervals important? I'd say for you, the most important application of this knowledge of what all those intervals are named is going to be when you're naming chords. 2 directions. You could come up with a chord and not know what to call it, or you could come up to the name of a chord that you see written somewhere, and you might want to deduce what notes are in the chord. You might even want to figure out what fingering the chord is. And we will get into more about that later. But to sum up, we started out with going over the science of what happens when you strike a musical note, what a sound wave looks like on a guitar string. We turned that into why the fifth is just so dang powerful and so common. Why in rock and roll do we use power chords so much with distorted guitars? It's because the fifth is in the note, and distortion takes away a lot of the spice. If you have a distorted guitar, you're not going to hear the subtleties of a C major seventh, but you will hear the power of a C power chord. So I think that distortion tends to promote the use of power chords and sort of take away the importance of using jazz chords. So if you want to spice up a chord, use more notes. But if you want the raw power, a tsunami of power, that's when you use a power chord. You can use a power chord melodically, as we talked about with Also sprach Zarathustra and John Williams scores. And you can use, but you especially use it harmonically because, like I say, you play a C note and a G kind of tags along with it. By playing a G explicitly, you're bringing out some of the power that's already in the note as it's played on the guitar string. Okay? Hope that was interesting. I don't have any homework to do, and I know that I feel like the most interesting parts are things like the tools to use to expand your songwriting. When we talked last week about secondary dominance, I figured that's really what we're here for. You learn music theory so that your music can be better. You get ideas and tools to use that you might not have come up with on your own. And so I wanted to go over those, and there were some other tools that we're going to get to in the future. I mentioned a list last time. I said secondary dominance was one, but there was also line cliche, the 2-5-1 transitions, and borrowed chords. Beyond that, I'm going to try and do something called tritone substitution. And now that we know what a tritone is, I can also talk about that one. But that'll be for another time, okay? It's good to talk to you. Talk to you later. Bye.